Welcome back to Deep Thoughts on this beautiful 78-degree October day. I'm going to go smoke-free today because I had to watch my buddy's smoke shop over the weekend, and I'm just smoked out. So, even yours truly doesn't smoke as much as you think half the time. I thought today we would talk about the definition and overall operation of humanity around this concept of corruption, because it's the assertion constantly in our society right now. In the United States of America, it's ridiculous. You know, most countries operate in this sort of emperor has clothes on thing, where even though the emperor doesn't have clothes on, everything's screwed up, and you know, corporations work with governments, work with religious institutions or what have you. Everyone covers up constantly. Even the citizens of a country that are being harmed by the corruption can actually pretend like they're not being harmed, because then they would have to acknowledge they allowed their country to get completely out of control, and they don't want to admit it. So it's just one generation of cognitive dissidence into another, like a Russian doll of matrix inside matrix inside matrix, to the point where no one knows what's going on constantly. Now, obviously, for the 21st century and for all of the Gen Zs, millennials, Gen Xers, and some baby boomers who are considering themselves part of the Great Awakening, we have a massive, beautiful advantage in our time. But we need to move, we need to do things, we need to spread the information. I have never seen more YouTube channels pop up in the 15 years it's been around than the last 2 years. People going from having no channels at all to having hundreds of thousands of subscribers by doing daily reports on the QAnonymous movement or politics or what have you. It's just astonishing, you know. Now, I could probably have the same kind of thing if I were into reporting on this kind of stuff, but I just find it to be soul-rotting, you know. So, Deep Thoughts is really aimed at going at the subtext of human thought. You know, let's get our ball bearings together before we introduce a high-level concept like who's president, who's a senator, who's smuggling guns through North Korea. Let's just figure out how we deal with, you know, managing our time, finding our goals, dealing with, you know, the me, myself, and I thing, etc. So, corruption. What is it? How do you define it? Because some countries and some people in the world have completely different definitions of what corruption might be. I think the simplest technique is to lean back on common law and say, do no harm. But then you have to figure out what you believe is a do no harm situation. Don't physically hurt someone. Don't steal. Don't physically hurt someone so bad you kill them. You know, there's ones like don't covet your buddy's wife and that kind of stuff. That's just good advice. Okay. That's just really good advice you should take. But what if inside common law there was this definition which said, you know, don't offend anyone? Well, then anything can happen, right? Anything can happen because you can be offended just by changing your psychological state. And then, of course, you'll have organizations, in order to manipulate society, will convince them that now this is particularly offensive. We see it all the time with the thought police, political correctness movements. The people that actually believe that political correctness is a good thing are immediately the candidates for individuals that need, you know, brain surgery. They need psychological evaluations and conditioning to get them back to normal. Because what they have done is they have developed a life where they hate themselves and they hate their life. And what they're trying to do is control something. They probably feel like they have no control in their life as well. I mean, obviously, if you get to a point you completely hate your life, I think that goes hand in hand with you have no control over your life. And so the idea is, in order to have a semblance of feeling that you actually make a difference, that you're worthwhile, these individuals will go out and start to police things. And boy, it's free. It's free to have a political correctness. Oh, you can't say, I mean, this most insane one I hear all the time is you can't say the N-word with ER on the end, but you can say it with an A on the end. It's like, oh, really? Is this somehow not extremely offensive just because you say it in a slightly different way? What do you mean by when you say that word? Well, if you don't mean something, I guess, racist and mean, who cares how you spell it? But, you know, it's like, I love that one because that one is like, it's the same word. You're just pronouncing it differently. I mean, it's so funny because, you know, I don't typically use that word. When I was younger, we used to use it from friend to friend. And it was never in a racist context, ever, ever, ever. But now you hear people trying to use it and enunciate it in a way that you can hear the spelling. Because, boy, they don't want the to happen. They need the to happen. Because otherwise, you're a horrible human being if you have a different syllable on the end of your word. This is what society has actually come down to. And if there was some word that was, for instance, horrible for white people, and we put this big police out, because we're the minority of the world. We're the physical minority of the world, white people. And we said, hey, you can't say this. Well, the last thing I would do if I was so offended by saying that word would be to say it in my own household, would be to make a bunch of rap music where I'm using that word that is so offensive and making an endearing greeting to my brothers and sisters and what have you. I mean, but this is the way it's been worked out with the N-word. It's like, hey, either that's a horrible word and we shouldn't use it, or it's not a horrible word and we can use it. You know. But someone is going to figure out another word that means the same thing, and it'll just take a little while for it to get demonized. So it's, how about dumb and stupid? Those are pretty intense words depending on how you use them. But anyway, I want to get the fundamental thought process and brain process so that you can see how just inception points of creating this concept of corruption in the mind is filtered. But when you think of corruption, that particular word, in my opinion, is only reserved for like higher end ideas. A politician selling out their country like Obama, like Hillary, the pay to play, give her foundation a ton of money, and then she'll greenlight a bunch of stuff that you want done. You know, Biden and his son Hunter, you know, hey, kid knows nothing about anything. He's absolutely a proven loser. You know, he's a drug addict. He can't follow discipline enough to stay in the Navy, and then all of a sudden, without any energy, knowledge whatsoever, he gets $50,000 to $150,000 a month from these various organizations in the Ukraine and China. Just unbelievable, right? That's what we usually think of when we think of corruption. But there's all kinds of levels of corruption, right? Now, for the layman, what's interesting is you know, let's say that, you know, I've never built a apartment complex or a hotel in New York City. And it depends on what year you're doing it, as the problems you're going to run into. Corruption tends to attract to money or power. For instance, let's say that New York City can usually take any establishment and turn a buck. Make a tremendous amount of money. If you open a hotel, you'll make a tremendous amount of money. You open a restaurant that's really nice, you'll make a tremendous amount of money. So let's just say, you know, you have to first come up with the finances to build these sorts of things. But at the same time, you have to get building permits to get certain things done. Let's see. So you can play the game on all sides. Plus you have to convince a union to give you a decent rate to build your facility. So all these people in organized crime, which are not your big mafioso guys. Now there may be an element of that depending on what decade you're trying to build your casino or your hotel or whatever. But straight up normal people could decide to be difficult. A mayor, a governor, a congresswoman or congressman, could simply say, well, I don't think I'm still thinking about whether or not to allow you to make that hotel, build that hotel there, do this, build this golf course. And they're sitting there holding out for a paycheck of some sort. And again, I say of some sort because sometimes cash payments are way too risky. They're easy to follow. Sometimes it would be giving someone a summer house, a car. It could be just that you have a gentleman's agreement that whoever you're bribing gets to stay at your facility that you're building for free forever. Because without their approval, your thing's never going to take place. But in the real world, in an ideal world, and this is absurd that I have to say ideal world, there would be no corruption. You could simply file for your permit. It is so monitored, the process of you applying for your land permit to build the hotel. All circumstances and decisions are above board, videotaped. Any private conferences about your property are also transcribed for the people in a Request for Information Act sort of thing. Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request. And you just get it, Someone could build a hotel and it's put them out a couple $1,000s just to pay off people to fill out the forms, right? Because you don't know how necessarily, so you pay a professional to do that. Then you're done. But it doesn't work like that. Anyone has to do stuff like that's got to do a couple things. You have to pay off all the official people. And boy, it depends on what day of the week you catch them, whether or not they want $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million. And through some, Leonardo painting being sold or Michelangelo painting, where you're like, okay, I got this thing in Sotheby's, I want you to buy it. And, I'll have my guy there. He's going to push it up to 300 million. You buy it, and then you're going to have your hotel. No one will know the difference. Plus, you can hang it back in your hotel. It'll be great. Big attraction piece. But then you have organized crime, true organized crime, which could be the police, could be a mafia type situation. I think a lot of that's in the mafia realm has calmed down quite a bit. But, I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who was rattling off some of his knowledge as an attorney about people you have to pay off. There's some candidates supposedly in New York you have to pay off if you build New York. In LA you have to pay off if you're in LA. All major cities have these cartels you have to get approval from, and then you have to pay. So you're trying to be a legitimate business person. But if you were to sit there and try to be legitimate, you would never be allowed to build anything, to do anything. You'd never get a permit for something. Well, then what do? You're like, you're the victim of the situation. And so you're trying to get something to actually happen so that people can be employed by you, and you're going to be straight arrow above the board kind of person. Now imagine you have 40, 50 years of this torment of having to get through these membranes of corruption. And then all of a sudden you become the president of the United States, and it's your turn to clean out this crap because you've been screwed over by it your entire life. And every single time you're screwed over by it, and you have to give us, a senator like Hillary Clinton, and New York City is the easiest, and New York State's the easiest state in the union to buy your election and steal your election. Probably California second. So if you're a corrupt scumbag, that's where you go if you need to get in. AOC is another huge example of a complete abject moron becoming anything in life, period. But Hillary, has no affiliation with New York. She is by no means a New Yorker. If you know any New Yorkers, she's just that, complete and utter liar. But here she is forcing her way into being senator. And now if you want to get things done that have any authoritative oversight by her or her group, you got to give her money. Interesting. It's one of these tumultuous situations where you have, in some cases, like a Stockholm Syndrome situation where you're being held captive and you don't have control, but you want to live. Someone tells you, well, if you don't do this thing that compromises who you are, and I'm going to, this creepazoid dude in the basement, some Joe Biden, John Podesta, or his buddy, or his brother, Tony Podesta, complete fucking murdering pedophiles. They have a kid down in the basement, and it's all being videotaped, and there's photographs taken, and it's the worst thing on planet Earth. But the kid doesn't do what they tell him to do. They're going to kill him. Of course, the Podesta brothers would just murder the person, just like they did in Portugal with that poor little girl. But if they don't do what they're told, they die. And so you do these things, and, you're screwed. In the end, no one would ever blame you for doing something or blame the person for doing something. And what shocks me is that this whole last presidency of the United States it's one of these situations where draining the swamp, we knew would go in a particular realm. If you had half a brain, you knew that, one, you have, Strzok and Page talking about insurance policy. Obviously, Comey and Rod Rosenstein and all these folks had the insurance policies to get anyone who was accidentally elected as president to get kicked out through corruption, this, bullshit, some fake thing. So they soft pedal it at first. They're thinking, hey, we don't need to do anything major. We're just going to accuse this guy of working with the Russians. The American people are going to totally believe us because we're totally delusional and think we actually are the majority when we're the tiny scum on the top of the otherwise clean water. And then when they realize that doesn't work, it's not working, well, you got a problem, don't you? You got to ratchet it up. So they go for round 2 and round 3 and round 4, and I don't even know what round we're on at this point. But you're talking about a cabal of deep state, mega corrupt people. Mega corrupt. So when it comes to corruption and making accusations, well, they know all the games. They invented the games. They continued the games. But what do we know about the process of trying to eliminate a well-established, incumbent deep state organization? Well, the closer you get to the pinch-off point, that moment where they're going to lose everything, they're all gone, they're all being arrested, they are going to go berserk. This is pushing the feral, corrupt beast into the corner, and they have to just hit the doomsday device to get out. That is where they are right now. That is why they have gone for complete absurdity. That is why Nancy Pelosi sounds like the most drugged out crack addict, meth addict when she goes to a microphone. She is imploding, trying to keep her words straight. One, I think she's starting to suffer from at least base level dementia, if not Alzheimer's. Adam Schiff, he's a former, probably a boy toucher, just like Biden and the Podestas, who has made a life out of misdirection. But they are all in their own minds. They can't possibly become legit, right? They can't go visit Trump, have a little heartfelt conversation and say, you know what, I'm really sorry, but I was raised in this corrupt environment. It was the way everything got done. It has taken me a while to wake up. All right, let's just see. The Democratic Party's destroyed. It's over. So we're going to have to do something here because it needs to be rebuilt. I'm going to come out of being an extreme leftist, globalist, socialist, communist, fucking globalist piece of shit, and I'm going to come over here to the center. And I'm going to show some bipartisan, abilities to work. Let's go. What do you want to do? Let's do this healthcare thing. Let's do something else. And patch everything up, or at least attempt to patch things up. But they are so ignorant to the American people and the public at large that I think they actually believe their own hype. Again, QAnon, I think that at this point it's turned into a dangerous religion, regardless if it's true or not. Joe M on fucking Twitter just keeps he's trying to chastise people for not believing in a guy that disappeared after the El Paso shooting. Supposedly, Kern is coming back, this HN replacement. Taken god-awful amount of time to get it set up, which is sort of a joke in general. And then, again, you're supposed to believe, Christ disappears, that even though he said he wasn't going to disappear, he did disappear, and you're supposed to continue believing the plan. I think an idea is a plan. So if this was some live-action role-playing thing, all you have to do is just say, here, guys, wouldn't it be cool if... I've done it a million times on shows, right? But we knew these folks were going to go full nuclear before it's over. And I actually think that the full nuclear option for the Democratic Party will be to physically try to assassinate Donald Trump. I think that Joe Biden potentially was going... He may have slipped it up in his... Again, stuttering, blathering dementia by uttering October 17th, or the 17th, I should say, during his presidential debate. And then, of course, you'd have to call it off. But then some guy shows up to the rally fully packed, ready to... he's got guns on him and all kinds of stuff. Now, quite frankly, he could have been some rah-rah MAGA guy that was just going to kill some Antifa people. Who the hell knows what the guy's motive was? But I wouldn't put any money on that. So what do we do with corruption? Because we know it's there. And if you really start to talk about corruption with people, you usually run into one of two different opinions about the subject matter. The younger generation are like, yeah, let's go fix it. If we need to lob heads off, well, that's just what we got to do. The older generation is tired and indoctrinated. One, I think they lack the actual genetic programming to be able to conceive of the crimes themselves. I had a relative of mine say that she was going to go teach where corporate taxation was switched onto the back of the people. And I said, oh, well, then you're going to be teaching about Jekyll Island and the 16th Amendment. And in this typical Democrat delusional mind, a baby boomer mind, it was, no, well, actually, it all started and just mentioned some absolutely obscure bunch of bullshit to cover the fact that the fucking bankers in the, late 1910s had sat there on Jekyll Island with Philander Knox as their assistant to document all things 16th Amendment, had figured out how to say, okay, all the taxes in the United States of America are coming from our corporations and all the luxury items like, firearm, tobacco. And we're tired of paying. Let's get the citizens to pay our share of shit. We're going to exempt ourselves, put it all on their back. Boom, 16th Amendment, IRS, Federal Reserve, fiat currency. It's as clear as a bell. But the cognitive dissonance in an average baby boomer is unbelievable. I mean, it is like a physical, mind-blowing MK Ultra gone perfectly to plan. And again, there's that KGB agent that did his little interview in 1985. Just look up KGB agent 1985 confession, and you'll see it. But he said, and if I had heard this in 85, I would have thought this guy was completely delusional himself, but he was totally and completely correct. He said that the Russians, along with the globalists, were working out a mental conditioning plan such that the human being, when told the truth about something, would not be able to process the facts, because their cognitive dissonance circuit in their brain has been so massaged by other micro events, right? Such as political correctness, things like the Kennedy assassination being carried out by Oswald, these fake moon missions that people jump on. subconsciously, deep down inside, I think we know that these things are bullshit, regardless if we can figure out what they were. 9/11, we know it's complete crap. We don't know exactly who did it and for exactly what reasons. Could have been a million different things. We don't know when it started. The plan for it to happen started, but whatever. It defies physics, and so it's wrong. But when it comes down to, in this particular case, this individual is involved in banking and has worked for the Federal Reserve for 20 years. And so if there's any admission of the Federal Reserve being created by a cabal of banker families out of Europe, then this person has contributed 20 years of corruption to her fellow citizens. And that is actually the truth. That is actually true. This person contributed to the regulation of otherwise a free market banking system with real, greenback, goldback currencies. Instead, it was a fiat system with fractional reserve banking. Now imagine someone being very senior in the Federal Reserve for 20 years, and then you come up to them and you say, hey, what's this bullshit about fractional reserve banking where if I got $1 in the bank, I can loan out $9 more? And then that person says, I kid you not, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't think there's anything like that in economics. There's nothing called fractional reserve banking. And you're going, whoa. Don't you have an MBA? Right? A master's in business administration? Don't you have a degree in shit like this? How are you working for the Federal Reserve, but you have no goddamn clue the fractional reserve banking not only exists, but in universities around the world, even in translated languages, that's exactly what it's called. So now you have a covert agent with their head up their ass for corruption. Because they can't sense the corruption, they won't even acknowledge the paradigm of the corruption. So imagine having a Ponzi scheme, right? So you got Ponzi schemes, and this is where you lie about investments that have these massive returns. You collect a ton of money, and initially, you obviously put up a fake front of what's going to come back as a result of putting $10 in. You tell them they're going to get $12 back within a couple months. They trust you, and then you keep raising money, and you use the new money you raised to pay off the minimum amount of profit for your first customers, and you keep that going as long as you possibly can until all the customers go, where the hell's my money? And you've already run off with it, invested it, and they can't get you. That's a Ponzi scheme, right? And it's named after the guy who first did it, Ponzi, which I didn't know until a couple years ago. But imagine helping someone create a Ponzi scheme. You're engaging in this beg, borrow, and steal thing that is a Ponzi scheme. And then someone comes up to you and says, hey, man, what are you doing in this Ponzi scheme? What is that? Well, it's when you do this, this, and this. I don't know what you're talking about. It's exactly what they're doing. But they can't conceive of it. Because to conceive of it implies responsibility for what they're doing. You ever wonder why Antifa wears a bunch of little bandanas like they're stagecoach robbers? I'll tell you why. And once we as Americans start to apprehend these pieces of shit and start throwing them into prisons, or at least jail cells, and trying to find out who they are, we won't realize that this is the case. Now, of course, there are indigenous human beings to the United States of America who are just, abject morons, barely have two brain cells to rub together. But there are also foreign agents that aren't American who then conceal their foreign agent origins. Remember, this happened in the Ukraine. A bunch of Nazis came into the Ukraine who didn't speak Russian or any local language. They were strictly German-speaking kids who literally had, swastika tattoos and stuff on them, which is really strange because I don't even see those in Germany. But it's a Soros thing. So now we have folks that are hiding themselves as truly terrorist cell insurgents from foreign countries where perhaps the skin color passes for American, But we're a melting pot, so you can do pretty much anything and you're okay. And of course, the cops in a lot of locations, although they're starting to beat the shit out of these kids, which is fantastic. Our president hasn't done anything to declare Antifa a terrorist organization, yet they have physically abused thousands of people and caused major bodily harm. I guess the president of the United States is waiting for Antifa member to murder someone, and then they're going to give a fuck about this threat. Imagine this. You run a daycare center, or you put your kid in a daycare center or something, and you got a kid that's a little bastard and a kid that's not. The kid that's a little bastard continues beating up pretty much all the kids in the room. Maybe he grew just a little bit more. Maybe his parents are putting him in there and he's way too old to be in there. What do you do as a daycare center operator or a parent in that situation? Do you wait for that kid to grab a pencil and jab it through some kid's eye, removing their sight for the rest of their life? No, you beat the little kid's fucking ass, right? I mean, you spank him. You put him in a fucking room all by himself. You take him and you send him home with his shitty parents and say, you deal with this kid. He's not going to corrupt all these good kids who actually have some genetic intelligence not to fucking do this. Boom, problem solved. With Antifa, we're sitting around messing around. How many times have you heard before Donald Trump someone threaten the president's life and not get a visit from the Secret Service? How many times did that happen in your lifetime? In my estimation, of my entire 50 years on this planet, I have never heard someone publicly threaten the president and just walk away. Never, ever, ever. I don't know if my life has had, in the last 3 years, a single month where I'm not hearing someone publicly threaten Donald Trump's life, either in a music video, a picture, off at some protest. But it's happening constantly. Tom Arnold got a visit by the Secret Service for something he posted. Hey, I'm not hearing it, Snoop Dogg. I'm not hearing Madonna. I'm not hearing, Jeb Bush, Robert De Niro, Joe Biden, both of which threatened physical harm to the president by saying how they would take him around back and punch him out. Oh, boy, that would be a funny-ass fight, wouldn't it? At least you wouldn't have to knock Joe Biden's teeth out. You just get him talking a little bit and they'll fall out. So for my money, we're waiting around a lot longer than we should. And we just need to have some law enforcement. That's it. That's it. We already got laws on the books. You're not allowed to terrorize a group of people, right? Think about it this way. If you had some creepy guy following you around, especially ladies, you've run into this most likely in your lifetime if you're over 30. Some guys following you around campus, following you around the grocery store, following you around the parking lot, and you just feel absolutely unsafe. Some guys sending you text messages with inappropriate content. In 2019, you've got the right to go to the police and identify this individual, put a police restraining order on them, and they can't get next to you because they're a threat. All right. This organization called Antifa, they have demonstrated their MO, from the Berkeley University stuff to all the stuff in Portland and Seattle and all these different protests outside of Trump's things. They've all yelled, death to the police, death to Trump, all this kind of stuff. Felony assertions of intent and motive to commit violent acts. And only recently are the police doing anything. There's not even an executive order about masking yourself during a protest. Hey, protest all you want, but we want to know who you are. Hong Kong, they know that all too well. They use green lasers and shoot it into all the cameras. Or they saw the pole down and stomp on the camera. But what kind of chicken shit enemy doesn't identify themselves? And in some weird reverse sucking sound noise, okay, you have normally a socialistic 1984 Brave New World government that is repressing the people. THX 1138, Logan's Run, Running Man. You have these bizarre worlds. And the people act like Antifa because they want to have a do no harm, free market republic that is, you have inalienable rights because you're alive and no one can tell you any different. The hilarious, unfortunate nature of Antifa is that you actually have completely opposite. You have the stupidest children and people on earth trying to create the global big brother state, protesting free market and freedom. Yeah, sure, they're jealous that they don't have enough brain cells to rub together to create any money, so they obviously go after the 1% constantly. They're dying to be the 1%, but they hate the 1% until they are the 1%. You know, how many people do you walk up to that have a dream to make $1 million or whatever the amount of money is they think they're going to have to never work again? You realize in California, if I gave you $1 million tax-free, maybe you can live in Southern California for 8 years without working. You know, and if you could just invest it properly, but if you invest, you could lose it all in a year, you know. That's not that much money anymore. But anyway, everybody has a dream of making money, especially in these millennial groups. But they never talk about the fact that they shouldn't want to do anything that makes any money based on their doctrine of no one should be rich. Now, honestly, the people that I know that have made a tremendous amount of money and didn't make that their objective, they simply did what they loved and they made a ton of money. But what's interesting about them all is that they never really spend any of the money. And it's almost as if they knew if they started spending that money, they would get potentially addicted to that process, and there's simply not going to be enough. But now imagine a lot of the corruption is based on the acquisition of money. But again, if you know a bunch of rich people, there's no disproportional happiness with people with money versus people without. There's the same level of people that are totally happy with no money as there are people that hate not having money. There's people that are totally happy having money and people that hate themselves even though they have the money. It's not like they hate having money, but I see it all the time. The big one that is pretty prevalent in Southern California. And what's interesting about Southern California is I get this extreme examples around me constantly when it comes to a particular algorithm of life, such as I'll go eat somewhere and I'll see some guy pull up in a Bentley, comes in, maybe he's in shape. Usually they're not. They're older, like we're talking late 50s, mid 60s sort of thing. And they're by themselves. No wedding ring. Oh my God, they've got a Piaget Polo watch. They've got clothes on that are probably $800 and it's just a jumpsuit. Couple rings, probably worth a couple $100,000, if not $1 million a pop. But what I'm not seeing on their face is contentment and happiness. I see loneliness and I see pain. Well, they're going to get back in their car. Maybe for a fleeting moment, someone gets impressed by the car until they take a ride in it a couple times and realize, you know, you'll get a young girl on occasion that will fall for the possessions for a little while. He gives her the keys. She drives around a little bit, but she always has to come home to grandpa. And so it wears off. With the female side of the equation, it's a little bit different. But I see women dating really, really young guys. The cougars dating these young kids in their 20s, in their 30s. They're at least 20, 30 years older. And again, if they can make it work, man, it's great. But oftentimes I see the young guys, they get in, they have fun with the money, they have fun with some possessions, then they're out. And it just utterly destroys these folks. So where is this incredible world with money where everyone's just happy? Here's your $1 million. You're just totally cured. Doesn't happen. So part of the corruption could be getting us to lust for things that have nothing to do with a well-balanced life. Ask a hoarder. who buys a bunch of stuff constantly and then just stacks it up in their house. Man, if stuff meant you're happy, hoarders would probably be the most well-adjusted human beings and happy people on planet Earth. They're 10,000 bags from Target, you know. So in America, we have a deep state that is incredibly embedded in government. You know, it just so happens, I mean, that it's easier to name Democrats that are totally corrupt than it is to name the Republicans that are totally corrupt at this particular junction. Other presidencies, it's been the inverse truth. But it's interesting when you take someone, you push them to their very physical limit. And in the case of the Democratic Party in 2019, they have been pushed to their intellectual and power thresholds. Nancy Pelosi can only convince people she is telling the truth while she's telling a lie for the folks that are dumber than she is. That is the only person you can ever tell a lie to that will believe you is someone that's dumber than you are. Now, that's not to confuse someone who suspects you're lying, but they love you and they're going to just give you the benefit of the doubt, even though everything doesn't add up. That's different. That's a very smart person. But your Adam Schiffs, who lie about absolutely everything, and I mean lie about what's in a transcript, and the transcript comes out and he looks just like a complete piece of shit, and he just keeps doubling down. The media out there that is just the worst on planet Earth. It's the worst it's ever been, ever. The cognitive dissonance and utter bullshit lies coming out of these folks, second by second. It has never been more corrupt and more untruthful than it is in 2019. I seriously can't think of anything worse than it is right now. And I'd have to say September 11th, 2001 was an epic moment of dispensing lies. But, you know, what's funny about it is I actually believe that maybe we didn't, some journalists simply didn't know that was a complete bunch of bullshit. But they now know that what we're wasting time doing in America is complete bullshit. And again, I'm going to say this a few times because I want you to think about it. Imagine you go to work. Well, you go to work, let's just say. I'm willing to bet that you have to actually accomplish something for you to get your paycheck. Right? You've got to do whatever it is you do. And then you get monitored. You have a certain quota you have to accomplish. If you're an accountant, you got to do so many jobs to get a paycheck, right? The Democratic Party of the United States of America, since Donald Trump was sworn into office till today, October, I think it's 21st, 2019, they have done nothing for the American people, and I mean nothing. But these piece of shit humans are taking up to $225,000 a year in straight up cash. But they also get the best health care in the world, which is not the health care that any one of us get. And they are able to push their kids through all kinds of nepotistic opportunities. You know, Joe Biden and his sons both getting incredible amounts of money through extortionism, pay to play. Chelsea Clinton gets a near $1 million a year job and then turns around and says that she doesn't like this country anymore. Hey, get the fuck out if that's your fucking opinion. I think anyone listening to my voice would love to have your kid pop out of high school / college and get $1 million a year job and get to marry some big, powerful Goldman Sachs banker, right? I mean, most of us probably wouldn't, but you would at least want your kid to be that successful. We have such an aged Congress and House of Representatives that we have people going insane in office. Presidential debates look like an interview for a fucking hospice location. I just saw this video of Pelosi trying to give a speech. It was just a few weeks ago. She is utterly stuttering all over herself. This is not a doctored video. In fact, the other video that they said was doctored was not doctored as much as they say, but this one is just full-blown real time. She's going insane, and she's the leader of the House. AOC is a goddamn MK Ultra fucking patient that aced her class, right? She just came out with the spiraling, twirling eyeballs, completely fraudulent educational credentials. I'll tell you right now, I'm just willing to bet that if we did our investigation, either, well, I don't buy it. You graduate the top of your class, but you can only become a bartender. Nothing against bartenders, but Jesus, you go up to a bartender, you go, do you have an astrophysics degree? No. Are you aerospace? No. Oh, so you just got an education like any one of us. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's why you're not a rocket scientist or a congressperson. I've always had this vision of cleaning up corruption, which goes something like this. When everyone's corrupt in a particular location or institution, then the only thing that sticks out like a black sheep would be someone who isn't corrupt. So maybe what you do is you slowly work with individuals to say, hey, how do you like having to bribe your way everywhere you go in this country? Every business venture you do, that this has been a pre-existing institution created by a bunch of guys a long time ago. How would you like to just build your house because you can build your house? So you get a little bit of buy-in. The buy-in spreads. Again, corruption is a tumultuous thing. It shortens your life. It makes you stressed out. But you keep going and you keep ebbing. And again, we're here already. This is what's beautiful about the Great Awakening, is we're actually in the advanced stages of decorruption. But what we want, and what has started to occur, is that the corruption's starting to stick out like a sore thumb. It is the black sheep. I'm kind of abusing the analogy of a black sheep, I understand. But it sticks out like a sore thumb. It is something that is immediately recognizable because we don't want corruption to be the predominant algorithm of society. And I think that's why we don't like dictators to exist anywhere on planet Earth, because as soon as there's a dictator on planet Earth, that entire area of the world can be corrupt. Everything that goes on inside a dictatorship is typically a corrupt institution where the people have no say. I have to say, Donald Trump is the first president in my memory that actually committed during his announcement speech to run for presidency that he was going to return the power to the people, and then has taken steps to unequivocally make that happen. It's huge. We know these bastards lie about everything constantly. They just say whatever they want us, I mean, Jesus, just listen to the Democratic debates. The amount of bullshit these people are doing. They're literally operating out of a playbook made when John Denver had a top 10 hit on the radio. That's what Elizabeth Warren reminds me of. Utterly, utterly delusional. Someone who lies about being Native American. And then it's just really funny. So an acquaintance of mine who has a bullshit job in the world, who doesn't understand she has a bullshit job in the world, posts this pro Elizabeth Warren thing. Whatever. You do what your feeble brain will tell you is a good idea. But I come up there and I said, there's a big picture of her face. And I said, boy, you can really see those Cherokee Indian features. Just subtly reminding them, you're campaigning for a fucking liar. That's your candidate for presidency, is a goddamn liar that not only lied about being Native American, told a bullshit story about her father being persecuted because her mother or whatever was Native American, or some horse shit story that never turned out to be true, but then orchestrated a fake situation where a genealogist had gotten her blood test back and said, you're definitely Native American. And then she tests positive for 1024th Peruvian Indian blood, which means basically there was a random match in the world. And this is someone's idea of the best person that could run the United States of America. So let's look at this. She's got a bullshit job. She's in this VR thing. VR is so fucking dead. It is unbelievable. It is fucking dead. She runs around at VR conferences all year long. Only human being on planet Earth, because her company is so fucking antiquated, they don't know where the actual business is. So you're in a delusional state of not working. I mean, I met this girl, she was in a swing inside this kind of WeWorks joint, right? No intellectual contribution to the story. She's going to vote for Elizabeth Warren if she gets nominated. Big fucking surprise, right? So this guy comes in to the comment and says, well, what kind of statement is that? You know, way to contribute to the conversation, jackass. Just love to meet these people in real life. Oh my God. So now, get this, let's just roll out the algorithm. I'm a dick because I remind this fucking moron that Elizabeth Warren's a complete abject liar. And that you're choosing a fucking liar to be the president of the United States. Joe Biden, it touches a bunch of little girls in a C-SPAN coverage over and over and over again. He's a candidate for presidency. Unbelievable. Harris, who's Jesse Smolier's aunt, who makes a phone call to get his ass out of jail because she's going to be running for president. If they ever figured out that they're related, she's going to have credibility problems because she's part of a piece of shit family with just piece of shits down the line, right? Bernie Sanders, he's part of the 1% trying to say that he shouldn't exist. I mean, he says, billionaires shouldn't exist. He's not a billionaire, but the dude's part of the 1%. How can you possibly fucking vote for someone who is a part of the 1% telling you that the 1% shouldn't exist? Hey, Bernie, why don't you get rid of the $160,000 Audi you bought after you got your payoff check from the Hillary Foundation for letting her steal the election from you in California? Guy'd be 79 years old if he gets into office. I mean, seriously, we're the United States of America, and we can't find anybody under fucking 50 or under 60 that could run this place? Give me a break. The answer is no. Corruption. It's in our school systems. It's in our corporations. It's in our government. It comes from outside in a lot of cases. But we have homegrown corruption, The educational system was, co-opted in the early 70s by European communists. That's what the KGB guy outlines in his 1985 confession. He was a KGB agent that defected to the United States and then just told everybody what was going on. And he is the best, most efficient Nostradamus human we have ever had on video camera. Everything he said either was already in effect or has come to fruition. We have corruption in our churches. Since I've been in California, and you hear me mention this every once in a while, and again, I wasn't into church much in the Midwest. I just talked about this just a couple episodes back, but we had a creepy preacher that kept coming up to us. Again, I come to California, I joined this church. First time I ever been inside of a church by my own free will. This dude, son of one of the elders of the church, and they're actually good people, he's a son-in-law, accuses the current youth minister of being creepy with one of the girls who was over 18. The guy says, I'm tired of this shit. I got a hot wife and 2 amazing kids. I don't need this fucking bullshit. I'm out of here. So he leaves. Pushed out a guy who was legit and a great man. Gets charged with 5 counts of child pedophilia and molestation. One of the charges was sodomizing with a foreign object. Goes and gets his PhD at Pepperdine University after becoming an extremely failed, embarrassing musician. So here he is. He's a Bible-thumping dude with a PhD. He manages to do a few years of teaching there. Then they show up and handcuff him. You can go look him up. He's a brown-haired dude. He ends up doing 2 years in prison for his 5 counts, denies absolutely everything. Okay, there's my first church experience. Pedophile right there. Boom. Corruption. Homegrown pervy corruption. If I come back down to Los Angeles, one of my closest friends, who's a brilliant photographer, has actually the same last name as I do. She had her daughter, who was probably 8 or 9 years old, keep reporting that when she had to stand next to the preacher, this little bump, or maybe a big bump, I don't know, was on her body. And finally they're like, okay, we're going to pay attention to you now, and you just go about your business at the church. And sure enough, they found the preacher had a Joe Biden fetish where he rubs his junk on people through his pants, just stands next to you and bumps you. Guy went to jail. There you go. There's your religious institutions protecting children. School institutions, I don't know. One of my girlfriends in high school, and I was actually out of high school. She was here in California. She was 18. She had the drama teacher, get busted. But the teachers union comes in to transfer him not to the first school after a molestation charge, but to the second school after a molestation charge. They'd already bounced him one time before. And I talked to my friends who were teachers, and they sit there, and some of them go, oh yeah, that just happens. That's horrible. That's why the teachers union needs to be nuked, among other reasons. But then I get with other teachers that don't want to admit that this kind of stuff occurs, or they've never heard of it, or they can't conceive of it, and so they sit there and defend the teachers union as if this isn't occurring. It occurs. And I'm giving them first-hand knowledge. That's the funny thing. I give first-hand knowledge. I'm not speculating whether or not this shit happened. I had to take my girlfriend for 9 months to court to testify, to give affidavits, right? Somewhere out there on a shelf somewhere is my girlfriend at the time changing her clothing. I don't know if she was nude. I don't know. I never saw it. But somewhere out there, some perv has probably got the video. All because of the teachers union, who should have busted the guy the very first time he did it. And this Mark McDowell guy only gets 2 years? Really? Only 2 years because he denies that it's true? How convenient. 5 girls, man. And what's funny is I didn't know the guy that well. I mean, I did and I didn't. But all the men and young boys, I guess, that, because I was really young, probably about 14 and up. There's about a half a dozen of us guys. And they grew up with the guy. They grew up in that church from birth. And so I was in the Bay Area. I had moved away from Ventura, Camarillo area. So I went up north. He gets busted while I'm up there. And I have all of the guys from the church calling me, and except for his brother-in-law, of course, saying, oh my God, can you believe this? Can you believe this? And I knew this was the case, and I knew it, and I just didn't want to say, no one would have believed me and all this other stuff. Unbelievable. So one of the very first things I'll say about getting rid of corruption is that we as individuals have to give up any type of corruption that we're involved in. Any type of thing where we bend the rules because that's just the way it is. Now, of course, there's fine lines there. I'm going to basically say without saying, so you can read between the lines, I'm really concerned more with your treatment of another human being. Your neighbor, your loved ones, your relatives. As long as they're decent to you, give it back. Now, if someone's a dick, you can be good for a little while, but eventually you just need to cut them out of your life because that's just what they are. And they usually are fairly committed to that defect. And if they happen to change their game and come back to you in a really nice way, then you can reintroduce them into your life. But life is so short. You've got to get rid of losers out of your life. You do. People that want to fucking cheat and steal and try to get shit for free, fucking lie about everything in their life. Fuck those people. And if you think that sounds a little harsh, then why don't you tell me what 1 year of your life is worth in gold? and diamonds. What's a decade worth of your life wasted hanging out with losers worth? What's it worth? Can you not do any better? I bet you can. I bet you can find wonderful people. So that slippery slope of, I cheated there, I cheated there, I cheated there, I cheated there. That shit grows, man. It grows. It's a habit. Man, I just got away with something. Man, that was kind of exciting. And I didn't, look how much money I have because I didn't pay full price for this, or I stole this, or I cheated this thing. Yeah. Everything's a muscle. Beware what you get good at. Because it'll all catch up. And, to steal and be able to sleep at night, and I'm not talking specifically about stealing, but being corrupt and sleeping at night. Eventually, when you wake up from the craziness, if someone actually notices too that loves you, what if you got married and your husband or your wife doesn't know you're committing all these, infractions on society? Maybe it's a crime. Technically, maybe it's just bad behavior. But if you're doing this corruption, you're going to continually lie to yourself that you're not. Or that it doesn't matter. And then one day it all comes crashing in, like this Mark McDowell getting arrested. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the funny thing about that dude was that at the church, his in-laws, from what I understand, the wife knows as a woman that 5 little girls don't come out and say that they got molested unless that really happened. They know. But because they had 2 kids, two daughters and 1 son. But the husband went into complete fucking cognitive dissonance and believed that these girls were just out to make money, I guess. It's revolting to think that having raised a girl myself, there's always a fragile stage in a girl's life where, again, they don't want to be perceived as damaged. And to have them muster up the courage to tell law enforcement that this happened, to sit in a court behind a microphone sworn in such that if you tell a lie, you perjure yourself. Which when you're little, man, that means a lot. You got cops over you with guns and shit, and they say, you lie, you're going to jail. Little kids don't go, well, fuck you, man. No, adults do that. So to have someone write the guy a blank check, it's like, oh, so you're taking your trailer hitch with your soul in it, and you're attaching it to the motherfucker that's going straight down, to whatever black void exists. I don't think it's turn the other cheek virtue. I think it is enable a pedophile to keep going. Show him he never has to truly pay the price for what he does. Let me know in the comment section the general areas of corruption that you think are the most acidic. For me, it's above all, it's banking, because with banking you control all the other areas of corruption. But down from there, you have, again, I would put the Goldman Sachs in banking. The distribution of fake money is always left to the investment banking houses. But the corrupt corporations, like your GEs, well, I guess it's going out of business or something, or really not doing well. And I say them because of the Brockovich thing, right? Maybe at times, particular military institutions have been very corrupt. Then, of course, local law enforcement can be corrupt at times. I'm hoping that people dumping water on cops doesn't create a whole nother generation of police officers that are going to be wholesale slaughtering citizens, whether they be guilty or not of violating social mores, It does alarm me that a cop can put up with something that otherwise would be assaulting a police officer. That bothers me. New York used to be known for being, the cops being pro 9/11, pro neocon, pro globalist, where if you said it was an inside job or the physics don't work out, they're going to try to arrest you or put you in a freedom of speech zone. That's what they were in 2001. And now it's been so cleaned out, you could dump a fucking bucket of water on a cop in from New York and they walk away. What is the guy in a swimsuit, totally naked otherwise, pose a threat to you, man? I don't get it. But your local politicians, they're usually built out of amazing individuals or complete corrupt scumbags that know where to hide to get a full pension. Apparently, if you become a federal judge, you only have to serve 5 years in appellate court or something like that, and you get 100% benefits for the rest of your life. Can you imagine that? So you go get a pension out of being a federal judge, then you run for Congress and do your 2 to 6 years, then you get a full pension from that. You're set for life, man. Well, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. I'll make it pretty quick today. There's 2 links for everything: video, audio, social media, contributing to the bottom line of the site and its operational costs. A whole new link to Season 1, which you will not find on this particular channel. Please know that BitChute is up to date now, so enjoy. It's a good service. You don't get 4K, unfortunately, and the app on your phone's a little remedial, but it's getting there, and it will get there. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.